Good morning, everybody. I'm Lieutenant John Delmonico. I'm the president of the Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis. We represent approximately 880 sworn officers. We are the largest police federation in the state of Minnesota. Last week, our board unanimously voted to endorse Mark Dayton for governor. And a little bit about Mark. Mark has a record. We know Mark as an auditor. We know Mark as the state senator. Mark has always been accessible to us. Mark's a big supporter of public safety. And you know, that means a lot to us, but also this is about relationships. This is about when there's public safety issues, who does the governor call? When we have concerns of public safety issues, do we have access to the governor? And you know, to sum up Mark Dayton in my own words, is Mark's a guy that'll listen, Mark's a guy that cares, and Mark's a guy that will get things done, and Mark's willing to work with people to make sure things get done right. And with that, I would like to introduce Mark Dayton.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm very honored to have your endorsement here today. It's a very, very important endorsement because it says again that I stand with the brave men and women who put their lives on the line every day and every night to keep us safe in my home city of Minneapolis and in communities throughout our state. I've stood with police officers all over Minnesota throughout my career. As a state auditor, as was mentioned, and responsible for the PRA funds, including the police and fire pensions, which at that point were funded at 105% on an actuarial basis. I remember the State Board of Investment to make those investments to protect those pensions for courageous men and women and for their widows and widowers. As a United States Senator, increasing funding for the burn grants, which provide funding for law enforcement initiatives throughout Minnesota and our country. And now I'm just very, very honored to have your endorsement today. I promise that I will continue the funding for local government aids, which Representative Emmer wants to eliminate, which would be catastrophic for police and fire and other essential services throughout Minnesota. And I promise that I'll stand with our law enforcement officers as they undertake their work to keep our citizens safe. Thank you very much for your endorsement today.
Lieutenant, how big of a factor does local government aid play in your endorsement? Obviously, it's very important to cities like Minneapolis.
Oh, that's a piece of it. We currently have 10 officers that are still laid off. Our concern with more major cuts in LGA could result in a big reduction in the size of our police department.
So, how big of a factor is it? It's a slice of it, but obviously Tom Emmer has a whole different view of local government aid than...
Correct. That's one of many things that was instrumental in our endorsement.
What were the other things?
You know, the big thing is about relationships. Mark stands with law enforcement. He supports us. He's willing to come to the table and work with us on issues of our pensions, of local government aid, you know, fighting gangs. He fought for burn grants, which were big, big grants, federal grants that help combat drugs throughout the state.
What would you expect Governor Dayton to do?
Let us have a seat at the table and listen to us and work with us.
As you know, you were involved in some of the pension discussions during the last legislative session. Did you feel left out then? Are you worried about that in this administration?
No.
You're not?
Currently, this last pension bill, no, we had a seat at the table for that.
Are you worried that you won't? There's some discussion that pensions, public employee pensions in general, are going to get a hit in the next administration.
Oh, yes, the next administration, yes, if it would be Tom Emmer, we would be concerned we wouldn't have a seat at the table, yes.
Would you expect no changes to public employee pensions?
I think it's too early to say. In the last legislative session, they worked out and negotiated a $2.1 billion reduction over the next $2 million reduction over the next 5 years, and we'll see with hopefully a recovery in the stock market, you know, what will occur. When I was a state auditor and therefore on the board of PRA and also in the State Board of Investment, and Governor Carlson chaired the State Board of Investment at that time, all the pension funds in Minnesota were well funded on an actuarial basis. The analysis back then was that if they were funded at above 0.70 or 70% on an actuarial basis, they were sound. It was between 60 and 70%. It was in the borderline below 60%, it was indication of difficulty, and back then they were all funded above 0.70, and as I said, the police and fire fund was funded at 105%. So obviously the downturn of the market decimated those funds, and the recovery is going to be essential to being able to meet present and future commitments. But I'd have to look at it with the legislative leadership and with those affected, but I would certainly guarantee a seat at the table for those who work for these pensions, who depend upon them, who bargain away current salary for negotiated pension benefits that they can and their families can rely upon. And those are earned dollars. They're not. They're the dollars earned by and negotiated by those who want to depend upon them.
An interesting phrase is seat at the table. That doesn't mean that there won't be pension cuts. It doesn't mean that there won't be benefit cuts for future officers.
Correct. There could be. I mean, the pension bill that passed this year, had us increase what we pay and also made some benefit cuts. So all we say is we'd like a seat at the table to be part of the solution.
Who was the board endorsed in previous elections? I know Governor Pawlenty got your endorsement at least once.
Or the last two times we've endorsed Governor Pawlenty.
Prior to that,
I don't think we endorsed Jesse, and I believe it was Arnie Carlson before that, but that was before my time.
very often law and order and police issues have often tended to gravitate toward Republicans. Is this a bit of a change for your view?
You know, I don't like to think of us as a partisan union. I like to think of us as we endorse the best candidate. And clearly, you know, the last two governor's races, I believe we endorsed the best candidate. In this race, I know we're endorsing the best candidate. So I look at it who the person is, what they bring to the table, instead of what party they're with.
Did you talk to Representative Emmons before his endorsement or something?
We had a formal screening process, yes, we did.
Did they both screen?
Yes, they did.
And did you endorse in the U.S. Senate race in 2000? Do you know if you endorsed him then?
I believe we did.
I believe so, yes.
That's a long time ago. My memory's bad. Sorry.
Senator Dayton, the Star Tribune reported yesterday how debt collectors can file lawsuits against consumers in Minnesota without filing anything in court. And if they don't hear a response from consumers, they can seize bank accounts or paychecks. Most states require judicial oversight, but in Minnesota, collectors can take public money without proving in court that the debt is owed. Should that be changed?
I didn't see the article. I'd have to look at it. The way you describe it, it sounds to me as though it should be changed, yes.
Senator Dayton, 1 week before you announced you're running for U.S. Senate, your attorney removed public documents from your divorce file in Goodhue County. What was in those documents that were filed, and will you instruct your attorney to return them to the public?
The judge sealed the documents. And, you know, when Rudy Purpich did this in 1990, people were revulsed. I think the good judgment of Minnesotans 20 years later should be the same.
I don't understand what you just said. This, what do you mean this?
Asking for sealed divorce records that were sealed before I ran in 2000. Even in 2000, when it was a more current issue, people had the decency and the good judgment not to, you know, raise that kind of issue. I just think it's way out of bounds in terms of what people care about for this election.
Sounds like it looks like on the airwaves that your appeal for totally clean ads and stuff is working out pretty well, Senator.
Yeah, great, huh? Well, you know, as I said earlier, the people of Minnesota will be the judge of whether they want to have clean elections or whether they, you know, want to go into the gutter all the time. And I'm very confident that people are going to be really better than some people want to make this election about. And this should be about the future of Minnesota, and I think it will be about the future of Minnesota when people go to the voting booth on November 2nd.
The outside expenditure from the group, which talks about everything, the Time Magazine article, and it says email tax. You support an email tax.
Yeah.
What is
I said to clarify any misunderstanding back in 2003 that I opposed any tax on any kind of email tax or on any kind of activity on the internet. I said I would vote against any such if it came up before the U.S. Senate. It did not come up, but I stated very clearly at that time I was opposed to any such tax. The subject has never come up, to my knowledge, among any of the three of us post the primary or before the primary, or any of the 11 of us campaigning among the DFL. I don't know where they pulled that out.
Supported email taxes, no.
Because they just make things up.
Respectfully, Senator Dayton, I have actually the petition from the county, and it says here, on the 7th of April 2000, the file is no longer sealed and shall be open for public inspection without restriction. And you had said to the Star Tribune at that time that you were open to have your records looked at, but these two specific files were taken from the court and given to your attorney before it was unsealed. So that was the document I was referring to.
Anything else? Well, I mean, I'm for reducing spending, and I'm for very selectively raising taxes on the richest Minnesotans. This election is not about tax or no tax. It's about which tax on whom. And I'm talking about raising taxes on the richest Minnesotans who are not paying their fair share of income taxes to make taxes more progressive. Mr. Horner's talking about extending the sales tax to clothing and to, so it'd be about $2.8 billion of unspecified services, and he won't tell us what those services would be, but they're ones he said that would be paid by consumers, not by businesses. And Representative Emmer, of course, has at least been consistent. He consistently refuses to tell us what his policy is going to be and how he's going to eliminate a $5.8 billion projected deficit. But if you go through a couple of the things that he has proposed, eliminating local government aids will certainly result in higher property taxes. On an Almanac's budget analysis exercise, he proposed reducing state spending for K-12 education by 19%. That will inevitably lead to more overcrowded classrooms and to higher property taxes. So Representative Emmer will ultimately raise property taxes, as Minnesotans have seen happen under Governor Pawlenty, and Mr. Horner's going to raise taxes regressively as well, and I'm going to raise taxes progressively. That's the basic difference among the three of us.
Senator, can you say that for reducing spending when you're proposing billions in tax increases, which would be?
Well, I mean, it's a combination of both. It's a combination of revenue increases and spending reductions. And I've invited the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce and the Minnesota Business Partnership. I'm still waiting to hear from them. I'm hoping I will very soon to go with me and help me identify further reductions. And as I do point out, this year's biennial spending through the state general operating fund is 8.2% less than it was in the previous biennium. So there has already been a reduction in these 2 years, which makes it more challenging to find a further reduction for the next biennium. I haven't had time to engage in hypothetical considerations. The reality is $5.8 billion, and as one analysis pointed out yesterday, others have as well, that doesn't even factor in inflation. So, we're looking at a very serious deficit, and I think it's one of the most important issues in this campaign. And I credit Mr. Horner for being forthcoming to some extent, and I think I've been forthcoming to, I believe, a greater extent, and we're still waiting for Representative Emmer to be forthcoming at all.
So you have not heard back from the business partner?
I heard indirectly that the Minnesota Chamber was formulating a letter they were going to send to me. That's the only thing I've heard. We did follow up last week at the staff level, and we're trying to make contact. So I'm hopeful that we will very soon. I'm not faulting them. I mean, they would need time to make that consideration, and they certainly deserve that time to do so. But we are following up to make that effort.
You made it the centerpiece of your campaign to make people pay their fair share. You told us previously that you have not paid what you are suggesting in your own taxes. Have you done that at all since then? Are you paying your fair share?
Well, I'm paying what the state law and the federal law have me do so, but I would increase my own taxes if I follow my own proposal.
But you're not doing that now.
Well, I'm paying what the law tells me to pay. I'm paying what the computations are. I mean, if you're asking, I've taken the tax cuts that I voted against in 2001, 2003. I mean, I pay what my accountant determines I owe, and I'm, prepared to increase my taxes in the future.
Are you avoiding higher taxes by having?
Come on, no,
Well,
I don't, no, I'm not.
Your trust set up in South Dakota to avoid.
The trusts are my grandparents' trusts. I have no control over those trusts. My father has had up until now operating control. He's 92 years old, so he's passed that on to a family officer. I have no control over those trusts whatsoever. If my father continues the practice in his will, the last one I saw, or the summary of it, which was some time ago, then I would be, along with my two sisters and my brother, the four inheritors of those trusts, but that's still at his discretion.
Express some exasperation in the question.
Which one? No, I exasperated, but I thought I didn't understand where you're coming from.
Senator, one last thing about the Republican Party apparently trying to bring up things about your divorce. Tom Emmer's DWI record has been obviously in ads and as part of this campaign. Where do you draw the line on somebody's personal life?
I mean, I think the voters will draw the line on November 2nd. Whether, that's the ultimate verdict on these practices.
Where do you draw?
If they're, I mean, it's not for me to say. Obviously everything doesn't matter. Everything is fair game, the way it's being treated. And I just heard from Minnesotans in the aftermath of the last election, across the political spectrum, just a lot of disgust at how poorly some of the campaign tactics were received by good, normal, healthy-minded Minnesotans, and I'll put my faith and trust in them. And I think that on November 2nd they'll pass a verdict. And if they want to repudiate better politics, the way to do that is to vote against the candidates or the parties who practice them, and support the candidates and parties who don't.
How important is it to get this endorsement today?
Oh, very important.
Given the fact that a Republican governor has gotten it the last 2 cycles.
Well, thanks for returning to the subject at hand. Very, very important. And I'm very honored and proud to have this endorsement. And it means I have the endorsement of all the law enforcement officials in Minnesota. And the fact that they previously endorsed Governor Pawlenty makes it even more significant. And as Lieutenant Delmonico said, this is a non-partisan, non-political group. They're men and women who put their lives on the line to serve the people of this city, of Minneapolis, and this state. And I'm very, very honored to have their endorsement. Very important endorsement.
During the screening, Lieutenant, during the screening,
Everything is fair game. You had said 8.5 minutes ago that you think the questions about your divorce records are way out of bounds.
Well,
Can you
I misspoke when I said, fair, I shouldn't say, well, fair game is a turn of phrase. The fact is, it's all being used, so what I meant was it's all part of the equation, regardless of what I think, so.
Lieutenant, did the subject of LGA come up during with Representative Emmer during the screening?
That was one of the questions, yes.
What was the back and forth in that?
I don't know that it was back and forth. We asked, how you felt about it, what you plan to do with it, and, Representative Emmer's position is to cut it. So that was a concern of ours, yes.
your belief is that that would mean police cuts?
Yes.
Did you get a similar from Governor Pawlenty 4 years ago when you asked him about LGA?
No, we have not agreed with Governor Pawlenty on LGA.
Did you endorse it?
Yes, we did.
Is that a mistake?
Nope. Just because we endorse them doesn't mean we can't disagree on some issues.
Can you address why you endorsed him?
Why we endorsed?
Pawlenty, Governor Pawlenty, please?
We've had a good working relationship with him. He's publicly said he would never touch public employees' pensions. We've had an open door relationship with him. He signed this last pension bill that we had that I don't think Representative Emmer voted against. So for the same reasons we endorse Senator Dayton.
Okay, thanks very much again.
Thank you.
Thanks very much again, thanks.